When Blondie first played their song Heart of Glass to their die-hard fans, there was some serious backlash. It was so different from the band's punkier roots. This song arguably changed their sound forever. It all starts in New York in 1973. A brand new music club was opened by a man called Hilly Crystal in Manhattan on the site of what was previously a biker bar. Certainly not the kind of place you'd expect any musical revolutions to be happening. This club was called CBGB, Country, Bluegrass and Blues. However, the music being booked at the club quickly evolved into something very different indeed. Now, the closure of the Mercer Art Center elsewhere in New York left bands with a punkier edge very few places to actually play, and they quickly found their new home at CBGB, like Television, The Ramones, Talking Heads, and Angel and the Snake. Angel and the Snake, of course, being the band's name before Blondie. At the age of just 3 months, a girl called Angela Trimble, born in Miami, Florida, was adopted by a pair of gift shop owners in New Jersey and renamed Deborah, or Debbie, Harry. After graduating from college with an arts degree, she moved to New York City to start pursuing a career in music. Along the way, she got a job as a secretary for the BBC and even had a brief stint as a Playboy bunny along the way. She's clearly a girl of many talents. Success wasn't immediate for Debbie. Her first gig as a backing singer for the band The Wind in the Willows saw her in a signed band for the first time, but their debut album sold so poorly that their second album, which was completed, was never allowed to be released and remains in the vault to this day. Not a good start. After a few years later, Harry joined the band The Stilettos, who were gaining some traction in the New York punk scene. It was here she met our other main player, Chris Stein, who joined the Stilettos as a guitarist in 1973. The two quickly started a relationship and moved in together, before quitting the Stilettos and forming a new band called Angel and the Snake. The name Angel and the Snake didn't really stick for long. After dyeing her hair its iconic bleach blonde, Debbie started getting catcalled regularly on the street. People would shout, "Hey, Blondie!" You can see what they did there. Genius. After a couple of lineup changes, Blondie had become regular performers at CBGB, and also the nearby Max's Kansas City, before being signed to Private Stock Records and releasing their debut album, Blondie, along with single Ex-Offender. The love of a sex offender. That debut album was quite 60s sounding. It had elements of girl groups and surf rock, but with a lot of New York City grit and attitude in there as well. I think Blondie has helped bring back some life to rock and roll. Rock, as it's played on the radio now, is really what you call middle-of-the-road, easy listening stuff. We're trying to say stuff relevant to our lives. Our intention is to take that tough girl approach and combine it with good, solid rock music. While the album was relatively successful, the band felt its promotion from the label was subpar, so they broke off with their contract with Private Stock and moved to Chrysalis Records instead in 1977, releasing their second album, Plastic Letters, and then toured extensively. This album featured a cover of Denise by Randy and the Rainbows, and this actually went to number 2 in the UK. But back home in America, audiences were less receptive of it, as it was a bit of a move away from their familiar punk sound. This album was being pushed heavily in the European markets, but it was held back somewhat from American markets. When we first went to the UK and everybody started flinging themselves around, it was kind of enlightening, because in New York, it just wasn't happening yet. All this time though, Stein and Harry had been sitting on one song they couldn't quite get right. A demo called Once I Had a Love. It was a bit more disco than the band usually went for. In fact, the band would refer to it as simply the disco song. It wasn't until they got into the studio with producer Mike Chapman to record their third album, Parallel Lines, that things started to really come together. Chapman suggested they rearrange it with more of a Donna Summer vibe, which was absolutely fine with Debbie Harry, who was well known to cover Donna Summer's song I Feel Love at gigs. On keyboardist Jimmy Destry's suggestion, they bought a brand new Roland CR78 drum machine, which had only just been released. This made them not only some of the first people to use one, but quite possibly the first rock or punk band to use one ever. They hooked up the drum machine to some other synthesizers and gave the song its signature bubbly synth sound, which the band then played over. It was a groundbreaking merging of rock and disco. They actually laid the drum machine over live drums in the studio, which had to be manually synchronized. The song was painstakingly adapted with synth grooves inspired by Kraftwerk and Giorgio Moroder, and given a sort of Saturday Night Fever beat. And in terms of the lyrical meaning of the song, I was tired of hearing girl singers write or sing about being beaten by love. So I said, well listen, there are also a lot of girls who just walk away. The album Parallel Lines was released to critical acclaim in late 1978, and Heart of Glass followed shortly as a single. And it became their first ever American #1. The Ramones made comments about us selling out, but everybody at CBGB's was pleased and amused that we had a hit, and jealous that they didn't. And this song was released at a time when disco music in general was receiving a lot of blowback. There was even a disco demolition night. Now this was a promotional event at Chicago's Comiskey Park in 1979. Over 50,000 people showed up, way more than expected, with disco records to blow up. It actually ended in a riot. So yeah, not a great time for a band entrenched in New York's punk scene to be debuting a new disco song, right? The New York Times wrote that the song had appalled Blondie's fans and fellow musicians on the underground new wave scene. Clem Burke, the drummer, even refused to play it live to begin with. And the bassist, Nigel Harrison, actually apologised in the press for what he called a compromise with commerciality. This didn't affect the success and legacy of the single though. Heart of Glass went to #1 in the US, the UK, and a bunch of other countries too. It was their first true mainstream global success. It was a genre-bending game-changer for the New York punk scene, and shone an even brighter worldwide light on one of the best collections of bands to ever come out of the same place at the same time. It also proved how viable genre crossover tunes could be. From there, the only way was up for Blondie, and Heart of Glass had propelled them out of their new wave punk roots to mainstream pop, similar to how Fleetwood Mac went from psychedelic blues to pop rock. And I've made a video about how their sound changed so dramatically. You can click over there for that one next.